Hello and welcome back to another episode of Diablo to D&D. My name is David, and today we're going to be going over the changelog for November 10th. I am going to run through this pretty quickly. There is quite a bit to get through. Once again, I have a ton more changes and fills up the entire screen. Alright, for the Druid, Fissure now affects a 20-foot square instead of a circle with a 20-foot radius. For the Sorceress, Nova and Frost Nova no longer get an additional damage die at 14th level. For the Druid, Tornado now clearly lasts for 1 minute and allows you to move it when summoned. So part of the reason why that is split up between the Druid, Sorceress, Druid is because I do this all in chronological order. I don't just group it up by classes. So I have a consistent record of what I'm thinking at the time, or hopefully what I'm thinking. All right, the next few are for the Sorceress. Thunderstorm is now its own spell instead of modifying Call Lightning, and you can cast it at a level equal to your Intelligence modifier, minimum of 3rd level. Inferno is now its own spell instead of modifying Burning Hands. Burning Enchantment has been changed to increase the damage floor instead of improving warmth. Shocking Enchantment has been changed to allow damage dice to be re-rolled instead of adding 1d4 to a successful attack or failed saving throw of 5 or more. That one was giving me so much trouble. So I figured Shocking Enchantment should give you a little bit better with your damage dice. And then Elemental Mastery no longer deals additional cold damage to the creatures with immunity to cold. So this one was just kind of not really a mechanical change, because immunity to cold means you're not doing any damage to them anyway with cold damage, but I figured you might as well not even bother if they have cold damage, just so you don't have to think about it. For the Necromancer, Bone Wall is now a spell. Bone Spirit's damage is now 4d8 instead of a number of d4s equal to your proficiency bonus. Bone Spear's damage is now 3d6 instead of a number of d6s equal to your proficiency bonus. Teeth's damage is now 1d6 instead of a number of d4s equal to your proficiency bonus. Deals half damage on a success, and also clarifies the cone must emanate from you. So part of the reason why Teeth's damage deals that half damage on a success is because you are covering the area in Teeth. You are throwing out just a ton of them, so it's much harder to avoid. Poison Nova's damage is now 4d8 instead of 8d8. Massive nerf, but that's generally so that it's, in line with the Bone Necromancer's Bone Spirit. Damage is so unbalanced in this class. Anyway. Bone Spirit can now be used twice per long rest instead of once. See previous comment. Raised Skeleton now uses an ability rather than a modification of Animate Dead. This was something that I had considered for quite some time and then just finally pulled the trigger on it. Animate Dead is a 3rd level spell, and having it at 3rd level when you should be getting it at minimum at 5th is problematic. Alright, next fuse for the Sorceress. Teleport no longer allows you to cast Misty Step using spell slots. It is just its own ability. This is something that I am considering doing for a lot more of the spells, where you just get it and you have to learn it a different way if you want to cast it using spell slots. Blizzard, Frozen Orb, and Firewall now allow you to choose which creatures make the saving throw only when you cast the spell using the ability. Again, kind of nerfing it so that you are, I'm not entirely sure. It's really late, so I'm pretty tired while doing this. Anyway, Inferno now allows you to choose which or who makes the saving throw against the spell when you cast it using this ability. For the Barbarian, a couple of changes that I am so glad I figured out. Frenzy now allows you to use 2-weapon fighting as long as your action included a melee weapon attack. This one was so nice to see, because otherwise Frenzy would not work at all, because you had to initiate 2-weapon fighting after making an attack action. Just being able to use stun and then Frenzy with your 2-weapon fighting to get the Frenzy bonus made my life so much easier when trying to figure out what to do with this ability. It did, on the next one, Frenzy no longer grants advantage on melee weapon attack rolls. It did get nerfed significantly, but that's partially because of balancing and partially because, well, I mean, it's entirely because of balancing. It's also a 14th level ability, so giving you advantage on all melee weapon attack rolls with basically no downside felt a little bit too much. Alright, Berserk no longer grants expertise with weapons you're proficient with, but no longer grants advantage on weapon attacks against you. Part of this is simply removing wordiness. I mean, your AC is your AC becomes 0. Giving you advantage just adds extra words, it takes it too much time when you're trying to roll. So, because you have to, roll twice, and sometimes it's not always 2 dice, it's 1 die, then 1 die, and figure out which one, do the math, and yada yada yada. So it saves a little bit of time at the table. And I also want to kind of up that possibility that, you might also get that natural 1, so it's not as terrible. And in response, you no longer get expertise, which is not something that D&D does. Not that it can't be done, but not that something that D&D does. So it does significantly nerf the class or subclass feature. Concentrate no longer forgoes additional attacks from the attack action to grant advantage on attacks and disadvantage on attacks against you, and has been reworked to a bonus action with different effects. The bonus action with different effects is that you can spend a bonus action, and then the next melee weapon attack you make with disadvantage is not affected by advantage or disadvantage. I think it's the next melee weapon attack. Might be all attacks until the start of your next turn, something like that. Or if you make a weapon attack with disadvantage until the start of your next turn, then until the start of your next turn, all attacks have disadvantage against you. So the idea is, I'm making an attack with disadvantage, then I need to concentrate to make sure that my attack lands, or, I'm in a position where I am vulnerable, so I need to focus on my defense so that I'm harder to hit until such time that I can get out of this situation. So it's a good offensive and defensive ability. And then Frenzy no longer requires 2 one-handed melee weapons. It's basically redundant because you are using melee weapons with strength throughout the entire class or subclass. So I kind of figured if you want to do a dex build, if you want to do a double throw build, I guess that kind of works. I can't remember right off the top of my head if that allows it, but it's just additional words. Alright, for the Necromancer, a couple more changes. Terror no longer gives creatures fear of creatures you control. This one is 1, cutting down on words, and 2, making sure that the ability makes sense. The idea is that they are scared of you, not your golem, not your skeleton kind of thing. Golem Iron now only counts your Necromancer level when determining the chance to preserve the item. Makes sense. You're a Necromancer. The more you've trained in this field, the better you are at taking or getting the item back. In the spirit of the previous video, Teeth is now its own spell, and the Necromancer ability increases its damage. So I had an idea for Teeth that was pretty unusual, and I finally just pulled the trigger and did it. So Teeth is now a cantrip that deals 1d4 damage in a 5-foot by 10-foot line, which you might think is pretty bad, which it is. But 2 things. 1, the Necromancer ability for the Bone Necromancer increases the damage to 1d6, so it's actually usable. Oh gosh, you basically have no ability at level 3, do you? I might have to change that. I might have to change it to a 15-foot line. Anyway, but as you level up, the levels 5, 11, and 17, instead of increasing the damage, they increase the size. So at 5th level, it is a 15-foot cone, so it gets longer and wider, and then it becomes a 30-foot cone at level 11 and a 60-foot cone at level 17, which means its damage doesn't go up because it's still 1d4 or 1d6 if you're a bone necromancer, but it does mean that suddenly those minions become a lot easier to deal with. Now, it's still 1d4 damage. You're not dealing a ton of damage unless you're literally facing down mobs of 1 hit point enemies. It's not going to do much of anything, but it's still pretty interesting. Now, again, that line is garbage, so I might have to come up with something for the necromancer. But, I don't know. Give me some feedback. All right, lastly, Rapid Concoction now clarifies its damage only works when active. I realized that previously you could stab someone and then, like, on the last round of it working, and then they would have another minute beyond that to make saving throws against the poison. But the poison's effect has already ended, so it needed to be stopped. All right. I'm just going to close it out there. I am very, very tired. You can contact me at XenosFan2, that is XENOZFAN2 on Blue Sky and Reddit. And you can contact the channel directly at Diablo TODND on Blue Sky and YouTube. Thank you much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Have a good whatever.